you for the lovely welcome. And I'm very happy to be here among all of you here at the lovely city of Ponce. This is my first time here, and I'm really excited for this morning's presentation. We will talk about a very important topic, which is cultural self-awareness and intercultural communication. And first of all, I would like to thank the administration of Inter-American University to invite me and give me this opportunity to share some of my ideas. And this is also an opportunity for you all to talk about this important topic in the online environment as well as in the face-to-face classrooms. A little bit about the City University of New York and where I teach and work. The student population we have is about 16,000, and as you can see, it's one of the most diverse counties in the United States. And so we have a very proportionate representation of major ethnic groups at Queensboro, located in Queens County. And we have a lot of diversity. So our faculty go through a lot of professional development at the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. We also have an initiative on global and diversity learning, which is one of the high-impact practices initiated by American Association of Colleges and Universities. So we'll talk about this a little more as we go on. To begin with, as we said, we'll talk about diversity awareness. So let's look at some of the terminology. And I'm going to kind of ask you for your thoughts on what do you think when you think about the terminology multicultural, cross-cultural, intercultural. In a lot of ways, we use these terms interchangeably. So let's think about what it means. As you can see from the visual here in the multicultural, you see those little dots all spread out. What does that mean? Multicultural is when we say we have a multicultural classroom, which means we have students from different cultures in the class. Does it necessarily mean that they communicate? No, right? Does it necessarily mean when you have a multicultural campus, does it mean that they really work together with one another? They spend time, they get to know? There was a recent statistics from AAC&U that talks about 60% of the college graduates nationwide reported that they never had a meaningful conversation with someone from another culture in their entire college career. Meaningful conversation, not just where is the library. You know, a little more than that. So let's think about what happens in multicultural communities. You have residential streets with multicultural, people from different cultures, but you kind of know what they look like. You know what they wear. Maybe you know their music a little bit, or maybe their language. You may have a little festival, multicultural festival. But this is a big question, even in the diverse county of Queens, where I'm from. We talk about this a lot. It is only a superficial and polite social interaction. That's it. Let's talk about cross-cultural. This happens a lot in academics. When you look at the visual, what do you see? You see some arrows going here and there, right? What does that mean? We have some purposeful interaction, which happens a lot in academics. People have cross-cultural projects. For instance, a faculty member might, in an online environment or face-to-face environment, group students together in different communities. So the students have an opportunity to collaborate with other students from different backgrounds and cultures, right? So it's a very purposeful, very intentional type of community building. What do you see in the last visual there? What do you see there? You see a lot of chaos and a lot of interconnections. Do you see that? So that's what is intercultural communication, which is going back and forth, which is agreeing, disagreeing, learning to respect other people's opinions, maybe look at the differences as learning experience and opportunities and teachable moments. So that's what it means, the interaction. So when we say intercultural communication, we're looking at that. So when you're offering a Blackboard, you're offering an online class in a Blackboard environment, that is what is happening. When you look at the discussion boards, discussion forums, that is what is supposed to be happening. And the question that we always ask is, are we ready to be a moderator for intercultural communication? And in today's session, you're going to learn about different types of communication patterns. Some of those you probably already know, but I'm just going to refresh your memories in the context of what we do in our classes. And we will also do a few activities on self-awareness and watch a little video that will help us with the empathy building. Okay, so the question to ask is, how do we communicate interculturally? It all starts with us. We have to know ourselves. We have to know, how do I communicate? How do I disagree? How do I show agreement? How do I praise someone? How do I make someone feel comfortable? It starts with yourself, and that's why we will do a little activity on personal values and tendencies analysis, so you know yourself a little more. And then in relation to others, we will see how we communicate and what happens when intercultural communication does not go well. So before we do that, let's look at, you're probably aware of the iceberg theory. There's a theory, there's a lot of contradictions about it, but it still is one of the predominant theories. It comes from Stella Tingtuni's Communicating Across Cultures. According to this, as you can see, 2/3 of the culture resides beneath the surface and is not visible. So if you have a class of 30 students, guess what the students are seeing and you're seeing about them? If you have a friend from a different culture, guess how much you know about them? Just the tip of the iceberg. So when we think about that, parts of the iceberg that are external are mostly the conscious, explicitly learned types of things that are changeable. So when we're communicating with our students, we're only dealing with just the tip. We know a little bit about their literature, we know about their, some habits, etc. The deep culture resides underneath the iceberg. This is the internal components, the unconscious, implicitly learned things that are difficult to change. So just because some students are taking a class with you, if they have grown up with a high power distance, which we will talk about a little bit, they have grown up with authority figures telling them what to do all the time. And if you're telling them to think of a project to work on and to take an initiative and communicate with your partner, they're not going to be able to do that. So think about it. They're not going to change. It's difficult to change. It's difficult to learn. So look at where the concept of friendship resides. Look at where the notion of self resides. Nobody talks about it. You don't know it. As we get more awareness, probably the iceberg would melt, and we will begin to see more and more. But the question is, what are we doing? Do we have the warmth of empathy to melt the iceberg so you can see more and more of the different cultures? Here are some examples of how core cultural differences can affect communication and behavior. As you see, this is kind of a little business scenario where They're talking about a contract. So he didn't give us the contract. Yes. Yes, what? Did he? Did he not? Are you agreeing? Are you disagreeing? Are you talking? Do you see how communication verbally can be so confusing? And when we are in an online environment, we only have writing predominantly as our communication. So guess what happens? This is another example of how behaviors in cross-cultural interaction can be confusing. This person is trying to shake hands. What do I do now? And he's saying, when is he going to take my card? Okay. He seems a bit unfriendly. She's trying to reach out to him. No, where is personal space? What do I do? So think about it, like how much of a confusion it is even face-to-face. So in an online environment, there is also the element of writing, linguistic conventions, audience analysis. There's a whole lot of other aspects. So at this point, I would like you to think about a time when you had an intercultural incident, like when you felt that the intercultural communication made you feel frustrated, made you feel confused, made you feel uncertain as to how you should proceed. And if I can just have maybe a couple of volunteers to share that, that would be wonderful because everyone in the group can hear about it. Go ahead.
It's going to be very funny because you'd imagine that someone who speaks Spanish and is in the Latin American culture would not go through this kind of situation. But I very well remember my first encounter with this was in Mexico City. We had just arrived in a hotel with my family, and we were trying to get to our rooms. And I was in charge of tipping the bellman. And I kept saying, my mother forgot to give me the money. And this is in Spanish, we have the word ahora and the word ahorita that have very different meanings in Mexico and in Puerto Rico. For Mexicans, ahorita is right now. For Puerto Ricans, ahorita is later. And then I kept telling the man I needed to be by myself in the room, and I kept saying, please come back ahorita. And he stayed there. And I had no idea, I was 14 at the time, so I had no idea what was going on until he finally explained that for them, the term ahorita meant right now.
Exactly. It's a great example, and it shows the gap in the intercultural communication that can happen even within the region. And think about it, if this was online, what would have happened? So, and it does happen many times, even in emails that students send to the faculty, the meaning is completely misunderstood because they used the word in the wrong context or the wrong word in the right context. Yes, go ahead, please.
We have a student in campus, or I think she graduated this past year. We had a student that she was, I think she was Arab Muslim, I'm not totally certain. And she came to my classroom once to do a presentation because I have a section on religion, and she was going to talk about Islam and the culture and everything. And when she finished the presentation, I went up to her to shake her hand, and she kind of backed up, a little bit, and I realized right there, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to do this. So these are things that, of course, I don't do it on purpose, but these are things that we kind of learn in the process. And she did explain it to me. That's one of the things that I had to.
That's a wonderful example, and that reminds me of another example that I would like to share with you. Go ahead.
Teaching in the United States, I had a group with 2 Saudi women and 1 Saudi man, and then female students from Japan, Thailand, Korea. And these women were given, for them it was a big deal to be in this class with this one male. The days that he was not present, the dynamic of that classroom was a completely different scenario than when he was in the classroom. And it was incredibly difficult for me to manage this because I couldn't ask for the same type of input one day that they were so willing and jumping to do the next day. So it was very confusing to a certain extent, uncomfortable. Always felt like I was walking a line.
That's a great example. So as you just heard, we have all experienced transformative experiences, and this was an interesting example of gender conventions. We heard an example of linguistic conventions and the social and cultural conventions. And that reminds me, one of the professors at my college said that they have this Muslim student in the class who wore a hijab, and she's been missing out on the points for the faculty consultation because there's 10% or something, and she never showed up. And this person was confused that I told her repeatedly, come to my office with your essay and I will go over it. And he said, she's just not responsible because she didn't. And I asked him, I said, so when she came to your office the first time, what did you do? He said, well, as usual, like what I do with other students. We sat there. I even closed the door for confidentiality. I said, okay, that's where the issue is. She's not going to sit with a male professor with a closed door, and she would rather give up the 10% or maybe drop the class if that becomes a big issue. So many times, and the professor was quite adaptable and had lived in a multicultural environment, but did not make that connection, as you can see. So until we focus on these issues a lot, there are many times when our students simply drop the class, and we have no clue why they dropped. It could be because of isolation. It could be because they felt that nobody understood them. They felt that there was, the faculty member was ill-equipped to handle a diverse student body. So there could be all kinds of things, and we had no clue. So so these were wonderful experiences, and this is going to be fun to talk about these because I'm going to bring up some of the intercultural communication patterns as we go on. At this point, I would like to share with you a scene from a video. In this scene, a tourist comes to New York, and all she wants to do is order coffee. And so as you're watching this, I usually use this as an empathy building activity, so you can start putting yourself in the shoes of the other person and see how the person must be feeling. And so this is, so let's take a few minutes and watch this.
Blender and cinnamon over there. That's $4.30.
This lady is so rude.
Yes.
She must be having a bad day.
And corn muffin. That's $7.30, please.
Let me get a regular coffee.
Yeah.
The blueberry muffin.
Here's your receipt. Please pick up your food over there.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Next. How you doing today, ma'am?
I want
I asked how you were doing today.
I'm doing
You can't take all that time. I got a long line here.
sorry, what to eat?
Are you kidding me right now? Please hurry up, lady.
Vegetarian?
Vegetarian is fine. What do you want to eat?
Only vegetarian.
A bagel, a wrap, a sandwich?
Sandwich.
Okay. And what kind of filling do you want inside? Do you want cheese, tomatoes, lettuce?
Huh?
Lady, do you see you are holding up my line? This is not rocket science. Cheese?
Cheese.
Yes to cheese. Anything to drink?
Water.
Still or sparkling?
Only water.
Still or sparkling?
Coffee.
Americano, cappuccino, latte.
Lydia, I don't got all day.
Americano, cappuccino, latte.
Nice coffee.
What?
Nice coffee.
Yes, we have nice coffee. We have the best coffee in Manhattan. You know what? I'm gonna give you an Americano, small or medium?
Small.
Small. Is that it? $10.20.
$10. Sorry. Sorry. $10.
Hello, the least you could do is say thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
What are you doing?
I am not cleaning that up.
Don't bother, don't bother. What a stupid woman. Can I get another one?
From the coffee shop. Cafe, not good. Woman, not nice. Okay. Bye.
Okay, so what happened? In terms of communication, what really happened in this short exchange? It crashed, yes. So do you see the trauma a crash of intercultural communication can cause? In this particular case, of course, it was not that the person didn't know English. There is still intercultural because this is a cold coffee culture, let's say. So if you're not familiar with all the terminology, you're completely lost. Does it remind you of instances when you were traveling and you felt like, although you knew what you were doing, you felt like you could not take care? So this is something we do with our students as well as with the faculty, and talk about in the sense like if you were in the position of the cashier, what would you do? And we've got different types of responses. So this is something to think about, because intercultural communication can only succeed if you have empathy. You have to feel for the person who is struggling to communicate with you. And without empathy, it's not going to work. It will crash, even if both people speak English. So students came up with interesting observations as to how they would handle the exchange. And in fact, some students said that in some stores, when people have difficulty communicating like this with what they want to order, they send them to another section where someone else handles them, so you don't. As you can see, culturally, the cashier was into the rush culture, like, okay, you're holding my line, she's accountable for responding to, why is the line so long? So she just wants to move on with that. And then in the sense, the tourist woman is from the culture which is more of a collective culture where you don't rush so much, and also you ask someone else, what should I order? So you're actually counting on the other person to suggest to you that if you're looking for vegetarian, this is what you should. So she started getting more nervous because she was not able to handle that part. So any other observations before we move on? Because we will talk about this as we go on as well. Anybody wants to give a feedback of how you felt when you were watching it? Yes, cultural interpreters. So this is interesting, very interesting observation. As you see, there was another tourist who was French, and that person had empathy because he also had limited English maybe. So he had empathy for this person and was able to kind of put a nice touch to the interaction. Otherwise, the woman would have been totally devastated. With that, let's proceed to thinking about when we say diversity, what does it mean? And then this is just a little graphic for the 14 dimensions of diversity. And of course, under each, you can have multiple layers. Okay, this does not take care of every little layer that there could be, but this is an activity we also do with our students early in the semester, and we say that what would you put in the core of your identity? For instance, as you see the shaded area there is the core. So the core is different for different people. Okay, so when you think of your identity, what is the core of it? The core could be employment in your particular case or someone's case. The core could be gender. If someone has a disability, the core could be that, because that's what they're always thinking, that when people see me, they see that. So when they see, and also another thing we talk about a lot with faculty as well, that how the core keeps changing. What was in the inner core 10 years ago is different now. Do you see that? Like 10 years ago, maybe, your appearance or something else or who your parents are might be in the inner core. But now, maybe the children are in the inner core, or other things that are. So we keep shifting these, and this could be a very good activity to have with the students. What we do is we give them a blank graphic like this, and we ask them to fill it out and then to talk to other students about how their inner core varies according to who they are today. So as you can see, many of the non-traditional students, students with military or travel experience may want to put that in the inner core. Because the moment you start talking to them, that's what they bring up the first time. If someone has traveled a lot, if you strike up a conversation, chances are they will talk something about their travels. So in some cases, if someone has kids, they will talk about the kids or education, or if the work means a lot to them, that's where they get their identity, you will put that in the inner core. So the outer core is what we reflect to the other people. The inner core would be what means a lot to you, which is core identity in your case. So we think about this. So when we think about student learning, and I'm going to focus a little bit on the content learner, the interactive learner, and the collaborative learner. And many times, these characteristics are also determined by the culture and background of the students. For instance, if you have Asian students in the class, they may not like to work a whole lot as collaborative learners, because the concept of learning is different. The concept is that we come to class to learn from an expert, to learn from the professor. Why are they asking me to learn from another student? And this can happen a lot also when we have a lot of discussion forums. Many of the Asian students, if you talk to them, they say, well, I didn't respond because I didn't want to share all this with other students. I wanted to share with you so I can get the grade. Or I want you to share with the class rather than spending all this time sharing with each other, because we want to learn from the expert. The professor is the expert, not the other students. So the interactive learners, many of the North American students like to have a lot of interaction. So when you ask questions, they are the first ones to respond. What did you think about the reading? You will get a lot of responses based on the cultural background of the students. They are expressive, they like to take a stance on things, they want to frankly share without any intimidation from the faculty, and you will probably notice that. The content learner, on the other hand, could be some of the serious, maybe non-traditional students who are finding it so hard to even spend time in the class, and they don't want to mess with all the interaction and the collaboration. They say, tell me the content so I can pass the class. So now that you think about it, look for those learners in your classes and try to kind of make your assignments diverse so they can be all included. And with that, let's talk a little bit about the different competencies that we think about in our classes. So if there are hard competencies and soft competencies. And in terms of competencies, we talk about this all the time, like these are skills that you want the students to learn, right? So you want them to train in a particular way, you want them to experience something. However, in the 21st century environment, the soft competencies are becoming more and more important. As you will see, how the companies, if you look at the job listings, and sometimes we do that a lot with our faculty to get the job listings from their profession, from their disciplines, and you will see there's a list of maybe one hard competency, must know programming. And there's a list of 60 soft competencies. Must be adaptable, must be a team player, must be motivated, must be inclined to have diverse, communication styles, all kinds of things. Must have leadership qualities, must have this. Who is teaching them those things? Have you wondered? We focus on the hard competencies, we show them the programming, but when they want to actually get a job, the person who knows the programming as well as some of the soft skills is more likely to get this position than the person who just has the hard competency. And when we think about soft competencies, they are all related to intercultural skills. So with that, let's talk about a little bit what we mean by intrapersonal competencies. This would be a person's ability to recognize one's own way of comprehending the world. Because most of the students say that I never thought about how I do the learning, like what kind of a learner am I? What do I like to do? What are my values? What are my tendencies? Do I interact very well with others? For instance, we have a big service learning program on our campus, and we'd like to claim that for those of you who may not be familiar with service learning, it is when students learn something in class and they practice those in the community. So they work with nonprofit organizations and they actually practice those skills and thereby also help the organizations. So our English students work with the Audubon Society to help them with the publishing of their newsletter, that type of thing. So in the beginning, we wanted to have a pre-survey where we asked the students that, do you like working with diverse groups of people? 100% response, yes, I do. Because we all like to think that I am really open, I like to work with diverse populations, I have friends from different cultures. So they went through the project, and at the end, and during the project, there were lots of conflicts. And most of those were intercultural conflicts because the Asian students said, we need to stick with what the professor wanted. The Latino students said, oh, let's be a little more creative than that, because that way we'll get more points. Or, I want such and such person in my group because he's my friend. Then, the North American students said, And this is, there's no way to really generalize, but I'm just giving an example that there are different tendencies. So they said, let's do something creative. Let's not even have a cover page. Let's present something else, a video instead. So they did all kinds of things. So there were conflicts with the deadlines, with the teamwork. In the end, when we gave them the survey, do you like working with diverse populations of students? It just went down. The scores went down, and they said, no, we don't. So what we ended up doing is, some of our faculty said, we cannot present this data in the conferences because it shows negative things about our service learning program, because the students were better off or more comfortable interculturally than before the event than after. But we said, it actually shows something very interesting. It shows that unless they are trained in intercultural communication and competence, they're not going to do well interculturally. Just by putting you in a group, it's not going to be a substantial benefit. So then there are interpersonal competencies, how we connect with one another, and then the social and organizational. So there's a whole lot of those. And then again, just the example that I gave, there are some hard skills, and then there are some soft skills. So regardless of what your one's major is, they still have to embed a lot of soft skills, because one would still work in a team, one would still work in an organization, one would still take leadership roles, one would still have aspirations to grow beyond whatever they started with. So those skills are the ones that keep you going in the business world. Now, this is from American Association of Colleges and Universities. The question that we have at this point is, so what should we do? How do we go through intercultural competence? So this is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, neither for the students nor for the faculty. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a journey. And again, the journey begins with, who am I? And we'll talk briefly about how to focus on that. We usually have, some faculty have a whole class session on who am I, and they break down those into questions and issues about one's identity, the knowledge of the self. So it is the self-awareness, and we'll do an activity based on that too. The next question is, who are we? A knowledge of the differences. So what is it that we are providing in our classes that shows who are we? Is there anything comparative? The third one is, what does it feel like to be them? When you were watching the video about the cafe, how many of you placed yourself in the scenario and you said, how would I feel if I was in that position of that woman? So that's very good, because that's where intercultural connection comes, the empathy. You don't care where this person is from, you don't care whether you know this person, but you still feel, and that's a requirement for a global citizenship. We have to become globally aware. So regardless of where something is happening, our students will have to be equally empathetic towards those issues. How do we talk with one another? That's the most crucial thing that we will focus on today, because we need to look at how culture affects communication patterns. How do we improve our interaction, which is our ultimate goal? So we want to improve our interaction for the success of, if you have a business, for the success of that, for academics, for retention of students, for greater student learning outcomes. You're going to want to have that. Now, when you think about who am I, it's not just about in the sense of, in terms of a culture or place. It also has to do with, how do I use language? How do I apologize? How do I greet someone? How do I disagree? If you have to disagree, are you open about it? Do you keep it inside of you? And the list goes on and on. You have this in your handout also. How do I use nonverbal behavior? And we already heard one example about the Muslim student and the nonverbal things. How we organize our messages? And we'll talk about the linear, circular, direct, indirect, expressive, and restrained. How do I manage time? This works a lot in the online environment. You may have noticed that some students take deadlines more seriously than others because it has to do with the cultures. You know, I am originally from India, and I have lived in the US for like more than half my life, but I felt that I still had issues with deadlines. You know, when someone says this is due on the 15th, it's just, okay, 15th means 17th is fine. You know, I'll just write an apology note. It's the same here, right? So if someone invites you at 6 o'clock, it's okay to show up at 7:30, you know, and then you can go and say to them that this happened and, you know, I got a phone call. So think about it, like, so deadlines, because it's embedded in the culture. Remember the iceberg? So that notion of self is embedded. So you cannot take it out. So maybe you have to emphasize the deadlines in different ways. Maybe you have to motivate them to maintain the deadlines. Say that you will get additional points or just some type of reward, like if you collect 10 points by the end of the semester, you know, or 1 point each, you will get something additional, maybe 1 day late for one paper or something. You know, I do something like that in my English classes and it works. It's a reward system, so that might work too. And again, the issue of your own identity, like what is your social status? In some cultures, your social status determines everything, including how you communicate. So if you were to say to, and we'll look at an example as well later, and if you ask the students to introduce themselves, they will be reluctant to say a lot of details about themselves that they're not comfortable with. Okay, let's move on to stereotypes. And this is an activity we do with the students. We think about, list some of your stereotypes, like the ones that you have learned from your parents. You know, what have you heard about different cultures? What stereotypes have you picked up from your community, maybe? What have you picked up from the media? Like, how does the media actually determine stereotypes or kind of create stereotypes for us? So the students have a wonderful time listing those, and they did not even know that there are so many unconscious ways that they stereotype people. So we do this activity in my English class, and I say that, how do you categorize the professors at the college? And it's a very interesting way. I say, think of a student who's planning to enroll, and they're saying, how would you categorize the professors? One student will say, well, easy A, no, you know, hard grader, or something else. Some people will say, friendly professors, inspirational professors, mean professors, you know, whatever way you want to do it. And so we say, how do you categorize your friends? Some people do it chronologically, long-term friends, short-term. Some people do it by characteristics. The friends that inspire you, the friends that, you know, you're codependent with, the friends, you know, all kinds of things. So that can help them determine a comparative view, and when they share that with the other students, that becomes really interesting. How do we talk to one another? That's what we will focus on a little more. Like, how do you encourage other people? How do you disagree? How do you agree? How do you establish trust? And we'll talk about some linguistic structures that can help you do that as well. So some of the challenges of intercultural communication some of those we talked about, the roles of the instructors are different. They're perceived differently by different students. Some people feel, I come to class to learn from the instructor. So in an online environment, if you're not providing them videos or if you're not providing them expert opinion on something, they feel it's a waste of time, I'm not learning anything, I don't want to stay in this class. Some people have notions about what is appropriate behavior. You do not challenge your professor. If the professor said that, I think this is what this article says, you say, I agree. Whereas we are trying to, encourage students to challenge. Sometimes I actually put topics that they will challenge their existing notions. So that could be there. How they structure information is different. The conventions of when they write an email or they respond to other students. So one of the requirements that we look at is in the discussion forum, they have to respond. There has to be interaction between student and student, student and faculty, and student and the outside world. So they should be able to find something, an article from New York Times or something else, and post, and then sell that article or whatever the ideas are, and say to the other students and the class and the faculty that this could be helpful in our understanding of this. So all these three types can help in structuring the conversation. Then again, unconscious linguistic conventions. Some students are uncomfortable with saying too much about themselves or giving too many examples. They don't want to. For instance, in one of my English class, I asked them a question in the beginning, and this is an online class as well. So I asked them, what is your plan for success in English 101? So some students are really outspoken, whereas some students write a few lines and they say, well, I don't want to brag about my plans because if I didn't get there, you're going to think that I was lying. So do you see all those notions come in mind? Whereas other students lay out a wonderful plan and they do nothing of the kind. They say that I want to enhance my vocabulary. I want to read like 2 articles. And it sounds so impressive because they're trying to impress the professor. Whereas this other student looks at it as an honor. Like, if I'm not able to do this, I don't even want to say. And so many times faculty misunderstand this, thinking this student is not quite motivated, whereas this other student is. And the same thing happens in a face-to-face discussion as well. There might be a student who's not at all read the chapter, and they could be talking a lot, whereas someone who read wants to hear about others, and they're quiet. So we see that as a sign of lack of motivation. This is taken from the learning cycle for diverse students. So this is taken from Kolb's learning cycle and adapted by J.M. Bennett, who is one of the interculturalists, one of the intercultural scholars. So according to this research study, Dr. Bennett talks about how diverse students need diverse structures for the online class, how you have to structure it differently so you can get all the students involved. So there are students that are CE, and there's a way to analyze that. Some of you may be familiar with that, like how the students can be analyzed. CE would be those who learn from concrete experiences. So how do you translate that into the online environment? These CE students, I actually went to a workshop with Dr. Bennett, and he actually classified the faculty based on how they learn. And they said you can do the same thing online. You can make groups of different types of learners. So social interactions and personal connections are important to some students, not to all. So if the faculty is spending too much time on personal connections, they're going to lose interest. And so some students learn by reflecting. So those are the RO students. So to them, an assignment that asks them to look for meaning is more of an assignment rather than just saying, tell us what you did last weekend, that type of thing. So looking for meaning will be important, exploring different perspectives. Then there are the AC students who like to have more of the research and the theories. So if you want to, according to Dr. Bennett, if you start a class from different entry points, or start from one entry point, go on to another. For instance, start with an expert, like a little video by an expert in the Blackboard, put it in the Blackboard. The Asian students will really love that because they like to have expert opinion. So whereas the other cultures, and the research shows what cultures adapt very well to something. So whereas active experimentation is learning by doing the project. This may or may not work for many. So however, we have to give a flavor of each kind to all our students, just to make sure that we are not missing out on anyone. And this is also included in your packet. So how does this translate into activities? So what are the instructional activities? If you want to give concrete experiences, focus a lot on online discussions, because that's where they can have that. Show some type of autobiographical personal stories. And I have examples that I usually share with some of the faculty. Like we read a story from Alfred Kazin, it's called The Kitchen, and I asked the students to write about a place that has meant a lot to them, because in this story, Alfred Kazin talks about how in his childhood when he was very poor, the kitchen was the center of their life because there was only one room. And that's when the mother did the cooking, that's where the washing happened, that's where the person did his homework. So the students write about that. So the concrete learners can really gain from that. Role-playing, peer engagement works very well for CE students. Reflective observation, students gained a lot from journals. If you ask the CE students to do journals, you will not get a response. Do you see that? So we have to see, so if any of you are interested in analyzing the students' learning styles based on the Kolb theory, there are many, many worksheets that can be distributed to the students, and then you can maybe mix and match the groups online. So you have one concrete person, one reflective observation person who likes the brainstorming. So how many times you ask students to do brainstorming on a topic and you get nothing other than like 2 words? A lot of times, right? It happens a lot in my classes, so I know. And whereas there are other students, they want to do a whole lot more of that. Abstract conceptualization, this is where the lecture capture, the research papers, not every student does very well on the research paper, but then there are others, you will see they didn't do well at all in the discussion forum, but when it comes to the term paper, they did a good job. So because that person is AC, abstract conceptualization. Active experimentation students like a lot of case studies, like a lot of projects, homework, because they don't want to wait for the big research paper. They like the homework. They will be turning in that. So according to Dr. Bennett, we need to have a mix of all that. So maybe you can start one module in the class with concrete experiences, another module with reflective observation, so everyone goes through the cycle in some way. Okay. So this is again a little more enhancement of what we just talked about, and how to use media to do the following activities in the class, how they can enhance motivation, direct the learner's attention, and cater to diverse learning styles. At this point, what I would like to do is, you have in your packet a handout called Values, Tendencies. Did you all find that? Personal values and tendencies. So since we only have a few packets, each table, the one that has the worksheet, these are the answers, yes. So without looking at the answers,